I think we are live. So, hello and welcome everyone to our presentation on pilot study by Center for Gender and Politics. And I'm excited to share our research and findings with all of you today. The title of this study is Friendships, Networks, and Solidarity Women's Political Participation Through Self Help Group Memberships. It's a peer reviewed publication, and I'll move on to a bit about our organization and then go on to explain about why we did this research, also introduce you to the team. Um, so about us, we are Center for Gender and Politics, which is a think tank based in India that contributes to a high quality scholarship. And we are based at the intersection of gender politics and South Asia as a region. We want to become a platform for researchers, policymakers, and the public to engage in a positive discourse on furthering gender diversity in politics, and also kind of bring in the contextual nuances that the region has. Um, Today, I have with me the team on this study, Ishita Gupta, who's a co-author. Ishita is a research assistant at JPAL South Asia and a researcher at CCAP. She has previously worked in monitoring and evaluation in rural Gujarat under the Aga Khan Development Network, where she worked on skill development projects with SHG women. Our next co-author is Srijita Chakrabarti. She's a young professional with Department of Planning and Convergence, Government of Odisha, and a researcher at CCAP. She has experience in researching in fields of environment, gender, public policy, and livelihoods. Um, I also have with me Akhil, who's the project manager and also the co-founder and director of Center for Gender and Politics. He's a public policy practitioner, a gender rights advocate, working towards politics, which is gender equal. Previously, his work with state governments of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. Lastly, me, I'm also a co-founder and director of CCAP. I have a background in gender, human rights, law, and policy, and I've focused on gender analysis of policy, law, human rights issues, and health. I've worked with NGOs in India such as Katha, philanthropies like Tata Trust, Government of Andhra Pradesh, and I currently work at Meta. Moving on to the study and a bit about the study. This kind of project was aimed at studying the positive relationship between women's membership in SHGs or self-help groups and their participation in politics through examining factors such as political awareness, decision making, and local participation in rural areas in India. For this study, we did qualitative data collection through 17 in-depth interviews across Madhya Pradesh, Kerala, Gujarat, and Jharkhand. And this was conducted within a period of 12 months. Um, while the data collection was qualitative and these interviews were also semi-structured, around 40 to 50 minutes, and they were conducted telephonically. The sampling for this study was convenient sampling from across four aforementioned states. Um, the women we interviewed were all married and were from rural parts of India, and they were active participants and members of SHG, and also Panchayats in their respective villages. 10 out of 12 stood from a reserved seat, and they belong to SCST categories. Seven held a senior position of responsibility in SHG also. One of the limitations in this study was while we worked on this study, we faced the issues that the pandemic had placed in front of us, the restrictions, the health risks. And because of that, we couldn't really physically go and have those in depth interviews and understand the behaviors and reactions and the surroundings. While doing these interviews. Also, this kind of really restricted and limited our sample size, and we had to rely on convenient sampling. We couldn't really bring in the diversity, which we hope to do in future as we go further with this study. The research questions that we were trying to address were: do SHGs act as an avenue for increasing women's political participation? And in what ways does the SHG membership translate into political agency? Um, I'll move to why did we come up with this study and why were we looking at this relationship. So, while working in this field for the last 2 years, from an organizational perspective, we could find anecdotal evidence on SHGs catering as a platform or a framework, and that support system for women to impact their political attitudes and political agency. And although, like, the main aim of SHGs were more on, like, fostering and facilitating women's leadership through financial literacy and bargaining power, etc. We couldn't really determine through evidence, through literature, in what ways has SHG actually translated into political participation and leadership. So while we had this anecdotal evidence and we were struggling with finding any literature, we realized that probably it's time for us to take up that lead to fill this gap and build that evidence, to be sure about talking about the positive relationship between SHG and political attitudes of women. Moreover, we also found very limited research evidence on women's empowerment and mainstreaming programs that have impacted women's decision making, which basically means that understanding at ground level so many other projects and policies that have come up and have really done well at different levels to empower women, have they kind of impacted political attitudes of them as well. We also believe that existing infrastructures at grassroots levels, alongside the investment of governments in these programs and also the non-governmental organizations in these programs and supporting these women, could be leveraged for civic and political empowerment and engagement of women. Um, Moving on to the next bit, I would hand over to Srijita to talk about the interview questionnaire.
Thank you. So, coming to the methodology and the interview questionnaire of the study, the interview questionnaire of the participants were semi-structured and and had open-ended questions, and it follows primarily three sections. Section one was about tracing the journey of the participants from joining the SHGs and then contesting elections. The second section highlighted their aspirations, participation during elections, and awareness of the civic issues. In addition to this, we asked them questions regarding their decision making and influence while being a part of the self help groups. And lastly, the section was about knowing the views on SHG memberships and how it created opportunities for them in terms of venturing into political participation. It was worth noting that our participants were all linked to a civil society organization which actively worked with them, and the key informants questions were addressed to these people. And this questionnaire was had open-ended questions and was structured with six sections. And it started first with gauging the work of the organizations. Secondly, it was about how they are involved and engaged with the SHG women. We asked them questions about how they have seen women develop in the sector of finance and leadership abilities. And lastly, we tried to trace the links between SHGs and political empowerment and opportunities that lie in strengthening this link. The study was conducted, as Sugandha mentioned, within the COVID period. So the limitations of the studies were the fact that we couldn't go to the field and speak to them. So it was on telephonic basis. because of which what happened is that the participants try to control the narrative and speak according to what they think we wanted to hear instead of capturing them in their natural and actual circumstance. And the sample of the pilot study was small in order to help us draw patterns and correlations, and the sampling was done through convenience, and therefore the economic and social status of the women might differ from region to region. Hence, I'd like to conclude by saying that we seek to expand this study to the national level and reach a larger number of participants. I'd now like to hand it over to Ishita for the following sections. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Sujita. I would like to quickly take us through the findings and analysis part, and for the interest of time, just touch upon briefly on all the various strands we tried to analyze throughout our findings. So basically, we divided our findings and analysis into two sections. One where we looked at power within, where we looked at the individual's political autonomy and their collective agency and how they dealt with it domestically and internally. So here we looked at things like how they broke out of doxa, which is what Bourdieu described as the unquestioned truths and things that we take for granted, like how these women, before we asked them prior to joining the SHGs what their lives looked like, and mainly they were all staying at home, only working in their agricultural fields and not typically stepping out of their homes. But after joining the SHG, those things changed. The barrier of the social life, the civil life they were not living broke, and they started participating, gradually participating in the community. Then we looked at the inter household bargaining power among the communities, where we saw within the households. I'd just like to talk about an example where this participant was talking about how her mother-in-law and daughter-in-law were restrictive of her joining politics. Her husband, in fact, was supportive and was empowering her, but their reasoning was that if she went out and started doing this, then their share of household work would increase. That's why they were restricting her. But then she argued back, and some of it owing to the SHG, the support and strength that she received from the SHG to fight back and insist that she definitely wanted to join politics. Then we looked at creating an alternative political identity, which basically in a household we see that the men is the predominantly the head of the household and owns the political identity of the household. But by being part of a self-help group, this woman now has a chance to become part of an alternative network which has their own political identity. So this is something that we analyzed, and how SHG groups had their own identity and participated politically as part of the SHG and not by virtue of just being part of their household. Can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah. So the second section, the second thematic area that we were looking at was the power with, or how they navigated the public spaces, navigating the panchayati system. Here we looked at the politics of space, where we saw that how the gendered spatialization of fear, because public spaces are predominantly more male dominated, and women have fear the threat of violence or judgment in these spaces. So we looked at how women dealt with, our participants dealt with that. Can we go to the next slide? There's a quote from one of those women which I would like to highlight. Yeah. So this woman from Gujarat, she said when we asked her how she dealt with, how she made herself heard in the panchayat, and she said that I would just pull the chair at the center of the room and sit on it, and they couldn't say anything to me. And we asked how she had the courage or the confidence to do that, and she said that all of her fellow SHG members were also a part of the room and were with her, so she didn't fear anything in that sense. Yeah, so this is one aspect of how they navigated the space as part of the um, self-help group. Next slide, please. Yeah. We also looked at political parties, and this is a question that we still have some more questions we want to answer here, because the political influence of parties was a little sporadic over the 4 states that we surveyed. And while in Gujarat, Jharkhand, MP, the women were not as as big parts or vocally part of a political party. In Kerala, alternatively, we saw that all the women were part of some local party or the other. And on one hand, the parties did support, like the some in some cases the parties singled out these women to come and participate in the as a reserve seat to participate and stand for elections. But on other cases we saw that the political parties approached the women's families to insist that these women participate. So in one sense that parties were promoting, but on the other hand they were also forcing them to participate, which later translated into more active political participation. Lastly, I would just end with how these women used collective action to strengthen their networks, how NGOs supported them by providing trainings, guidance, support, and also this translated into a form of role model effect where they looked at other SHG women who were also part of political parties and were in turn inspired by them to participate in politics. So you can read more about our findings in our paper. Over to you, Sugandha.
Thank you. And I can also see in the comments there are a few questions. I'll just please hold on to those questions. We'll respond just in a bit. And moving to the next bit, which is around next steps, and how anyone who's interested could be involved. So, as next steps, we plan to advance the study to a pan-India study, and we already spoke about limitations, and I think there are a few questions where we'll also probably talk about more about our limitations and how we couldn't really look at a very good and a diverse sample size. And I think this would really a pan-India study would give us the scope to carefully have our sample diverse enough to make those comparisons, and to be able to look at different areas and understand the nuances within different states as well. And in terms of engaging with stakeholders, we really would like to kind of engage with stakeholders who are much more closely working with SHGs at rural level, and also kind of share the recommendations that we have from the studies. Of course, the insights that we have brought in. For a detailed report, you could also have a look at the published report website. Sorry, published on our website. Um, and I think, in terms of being involved, if any of you would like to be a part of this study, also like the Pan India study that we plan to, you could come and be a part of the project as a researcher, translator, or transcriber. We did this study, especially the Kerala one, in Malayalam, and we're thankful to our volunteers who could help us in translating and transcribing those interviews as well. You could also become a peer reviewer. We have a mix of people who are involved in academic research and ground research through organizations, and further. So you could always come and be a peer reviewer for us and help us in facilitating this field work. I think we all, as a team, work across different places across India and outside as well, and I think like getting the interviews at field level is something which we still would love to have some help and support on. And so yeah, with that, I'll move to a few questions, which I think I'll give to Srijita and Ishita to answer. I think the first question is from Aditya, asking for comparison. Did we also speak to women in politics without SHG membership? Um, I think if anyone wants to take it, or I can just take it, I already kind of answered about our limitations.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, this is interesting because this is something we were considering as well, and we really wanted to compare, but because of limitation of sample size and because like the NGOs we had reached out to were working with women in SHGs, and through that, that's the line of chain we went through to get our sample. So we couldn't exactly reach women who were in part of an SHG. But in our next study, I hope we can explore this further. Yeah.
I'd like to add to this that to at least understand if there's a difference at all, the women we interviewed, we also asked them that have you observed any difference with respect to the fact that you are a part of the SFG and the people who are not, and the women who are not. So what do you feel about the same? So we tried to gauge that, but yes, in depth one is something we definitely look into.
Yeah, and this is something probably we'll take it up in our Pan India study too. Shubha Chako asks, what level of elections were these women involved in? Shrujita, would you like to answer?
So these were the local level elections that they were a part of, the sarpanch that level. So it was definitely at the local level.
Yes, some of the women were sarpanches and some of them were ward members. And one particular candidate only competed for the elections, but she unfortunately lost in the last election. She's competed twice for the sarpanch position. Yeah.
Thank you both. And I can also see that Musa had commented that the situation is same in Pakistan, and I think it's really good to hear that we have some sort of infrastructure laid down at a grassroots level, that even being unintended, they're actually supporting political empowerment of women. So it would be interesting to also see if we could do those comparisons and understand at a South Asia level of how this has helped in political agency of women and and actioning. And the next question is from Aditya again, and this is he basically asks, as you can see on the screen, do these women remain a part of group, as in SHG, political identity as well as collective, or even got an opportunity to break out and develop a political identity as an at an individual level. Ishita, if you want to take this, and I think we've already discussed a bit about, especially the approach of political parties and identification. If you want to elaborate on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. So yes, they did branch out of the SHG political identity and have their own. So at the Panchayat, when they are in a position of power, it's them predominantly who is making the decisions. So we asked them a bunch of questions about, do you call for the meetings, or how do you decide meeting timings, or how do you decide meeting agendas, and they were all at the forefront of it. They were the people who were organizing it. So that kind of gives us a sense that they were politically active as an individual as well. But as an SHG also, they basically used it as a pressure group to have some more authority at their position. So I wouldn't say they are exclusive of each other. They are kind of like complementing each other by being individually political active, but also having the support of the SHG. Yeah. Chirita, Sugandha, if you want to add anything.
I think you've answered. And also, in the interest of time, I think, oh, there's one more question. I don't know if okay, we do have 6 minutes. Maybe if Shrujita, you want to quickly answer this question. Mahati, I think to help us with research and fieldwork, first of all, thank you very much for reaching out. We can reach out to you, and basically when we start off with our pan India study, we could request you to come and join the brainstorming session to outline the research study and the design, and then move forward. We are a volunteer-led organization, so we always welcome people to come join us. um, Thank you. We have a question from Nivedita. I'll just read it out. So there's a law that provides reservation for women at the Gram Panchayat level. Were you able to isolate the results of SHG membership from the legal reservation? Um,
Yeah, thank you for the question, Nivedita. So I think we did ask all of them that did you stand from a reserve constituency, and out of 12, only two people didn't stand from a reserve constituency. Everyone else did, and so I don't know particularly. Like our sample size is so small for us to derive patterns out of it that this was a result of the SHG or not. But mainly we wanted to see, so from our data, we in the beginning only we mentioned that the number of women who are in politics at the Gram Panchayat level, because of the reservation policy, it's almost half. But but practically or realistically, do they actually participate in politics? That is what we wanted to analyze. And because of being part of an SHG, we saw among the participants that we interviewed that they were actively involved. They were not proxies for their husbands or just a puppet in position. So yeah, hope that answers your question. Yeah, but I'm curious also to see if there is a if like we wanted to also see if people were winning, women were winning from a general category, and two people did. Yeah.
Thanks, Ishita. We have one question. Let's take this last question, and I also want to thank everyone for putting in those questions. In case we are unable to answer now, we will always kind of put in the answers later in the. This is a recorded session, so we can go back and put in the answers there. So, what is the role of NGOs and what's the role of SHGs? If anyone wants to take it up, I know we have kind of this probably could call in for a very elaborate answer, but if anyone wants to quickly speak about it, Srijita, would you like to take it up or Ishita?
Yeah. So I think this is one big disclaimer that we gave in our paper, that all these women, one thing that was common between all of them, that they were all part of an active SHG group and part of an NGO as well. So these women had worked with NGOs. NGOs were responsible for training them and guiding them in some sense. So that helped build their role. So as opposed to there are SHGs which exist, which are inactive, the women do not meet or collaborate or don't do not, as we saw in these results, that those results do not translate in all SHGs. So that is a point we should know, that the NGO presence was quite important for developing their agency in politics. Yeah.
And these organizations provide them with a lot of opportunities, and there's like an access to information is also given by them, and these trainings and all that they are given by them legitimizes the existence of the SHGs to a great level. So that is the way these NGOs kind of help the SHGs functions and exposure.
Yeah, thank you. And I think I would also like to add how through some of those testimonies, we could also find that SHGs, like other women in the collective, really helped during political campaigning for some, and for some it was really kind of a source of motivation and confidence for these women as well. Um, all right, so we are just 1 minute from time. I would just like to wrap up. Thank you, everyone, for putting in the questions and engaging with us. And also, from on behalf of CCAP, I think I would love to request everyone to stay connected and share any thoughts and insights that you might have. If you have questions even after this session, please send it out to us, and we'll be happy to answer or think and include them in our next phase of the study. As a young team, we are continuously trying to kind of engage and understand how we could do better. So if there's any feedback, please feel free to reach out to us or send us an email at contact@cgapsouthasia.org. And with that, I would conclude. And if anyone else has anything to say, please go ahead. Okay, then bye, and have a good evening. Good night.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Yeah.
Thank you.